In today's video, we're going to be introducing to you why you should read Martin Heidegger's Being and Time. Heidegger's work, Being and Time, is one of the most important works in the last 100 years of philosophy, and that's why I'm very keen on introducing this book to you. This book is a wonderful bridge between phenomenological traditions and existentialist traditions. It's probably the most influential book in existentialism that's been written, and it's something that I'll highly recommend for all of you to engage with. The first reason for why you should read Heidegger's Being and Time is that it really makes you question the essence of being. There's very few works in philosophy which really make you want to reflect on your own existence, make you want to reflect on what it means to exist in the world as a human being. Now, existence used by Heidegger in this work is not something which is simple, or not something which is, I suppose, if you're approaching this from an ontological or physical or metaphysical aspect, this is not what Heidegger is doing. He's not talking about, oh, what does it mean for an ice pack to exist? What does it mean for a towel to exist? In fact, for Heidegger, the term exist cannot even be applied to the ice pack, applied to the towel, because the only things which exist, as he says, are Dasein. The only things which exist in the world are things which can make a stand on their own being. And thus, this whole reconceptualization of what does it mean to engage with the world, what does it mean to exist in the world, is something which is fundamentally unique, or almost something which is drawn out of Heidegger's Being and Time, which is not touched upon in previous works or previous philosophy. And that's why if you look at Division 1 of Being and Time and get started off with it, you realize it's questioning how can we re-question, how can we reframe the question of existence in relationship to the world. Furthermore, it is a fundamentally existentialist work. As I said, it is a question of what does it mean for us as human beings to be in the world. It's not a question about just mere existence, mere physical entities, mere particles. It really challenges us to think, well, what does it mean for you as a human being to be in the world? It raises these questions for you to really reflect on what does your existence mean, both to yourself and to other people. And whether you agree or disagree with what Heidegger is saying in this book, it is definitely a very good way in order for you to dive into existentialism, to really think about, well, actually, how am I meant to approach these issues? The second thing that is so good about Being in Time is that it is what I like to view a very good bridge between the phenomenological and existential traditions in continental philosophy, or at least in this post-Kantian realm. When we're engaging with thinkers like Heidegger, thinkers like Nietzsche, thinkers like Husserl, we're all talking about these figures as post-Kantian. They're post-Kantian in the sense that they're writing after Kant and are responding to the innovations and the reflections that Kant had on to the world. And what was Kant's biggest contribution was the idea of the transcendental idealist view, which is the idea that our minds and our perception of the world is independent from the world in the way that it's ideal, it's within the mind, but it's also transcendental in the sense that all of us have the same experience. Now, that is fundamentally a phenomenological thesis. It is an epistemological one, but it also has a phenomenological twist. For example, Husserl develops on Kant to say, well, he also takes upon that transcendental idealism to talk about a transcendental ego. There is this fundamental there's this fundamental thought or mode of thought in which the self is tied to, upon which one can bracket off the world, push that away, and focus purely on human experience. So Heidegger comes along and develops upon that. He's saying, well, okay, how can we base our understandings from phenomenology, understand our experience, but also twist that into a question of meaning and a question of existence in relationship to the world around us? How can we transform our understanding of experience and twist that into an understanding of meaning, what grounds us, and who we are in the world in relationship to the world around us? How does it mean that we're thrown into the world, and how can we uncover the world around us? That is Heidegger's contribution to philosophy, and really shows that importance of experience there. So when you're engaging with Being in Time, you're really seeing how the post-Kantian period really moves from this idea of transcendental idealism from Kant, this more phenomenological epistemic thesis, towards an existential thesis. And Heidegger's work draws that boundaries and draws that bridge very, very well. Furthermore, it really challenges your view of philosophy. When you're engaging with the analytic tradition, which I'm assuming most people do come from, you're approaching it very much from a subspecies aeternitatis view. You're viewing the world from a God's eye view. You're analyzing different things as independent objects in front of you. There's a book there, there's this towel here, there's my iPhone there. Everything is independent. You're this God's eye view engaging with the world. But then what Heidegger does is he's challenging this idea. He says there is no perspective independent view of the world. There is no way in which we can step outside our own beings in the world to understand the world. He says that human existence is by nature being in the world. There is no Dasein, there is no questioning entity apart from being in the world. Therefore, there is no transcendental perspective or transcendent view through which we can understand the world. And in some ways that's very developed, or that has strong ties to Nietzsche, who challenges that subspecies Agenartanist view, to say there is no that God's eye view of the world. Everything is perspectival. Everything is through experience. Everything is from that first person perspective in the world. That is something he develops from Nietzsche, and it's something where he then distances himself from Husserl, who really emphasizes that transcendental ego. So you do notice that there's that shift, there's that twist in philosophy with Heidegger's Being and Time, but it really reframes the way in which you as a philosopher want to engage your analysis. Would you prefer to stay with analytical thoughts or writers about, oh yes, we can maintain this form of objectivity, or do we proceed through this subjective lens to understand what the world's like? That's a fundamental tension through which we understand being in the world and which we understand being and time, and it really helps shape your philosophy. Number 4, Being and Time is fundamentally a work which helps you rethink your relationship to your life. In Division 2 of Being and Time, he talks a lot about authenticity. What does it mean to have an authentic existence in the world? What he's saying is that a lot of us fall into inauthenticity, and that inauthenticity is something which is very easy to fall into. We oftentimes find ourselves caught up in what he calls the Das Man, the one or the they, translated into the English. It is this idea that when we go into the world, we find ourselves in a pre-existing order of being. We follow what other people tell us to do. When we engage with tools, we follow what other people use those tools for. All of the things that we engage with the world through, or engage the world with, is through the lens of somebody else. And as a result, it is inevitable that we engage in the world indirectly through this lens, which is what he calls inauthentic. It's the inauthentic nature of Dasein. However, he says that when we want to become authentic, we need to understand ourselves as an end. We have to understand ourselves as a totality. Dasein is something which must be viewed as something which is complete. But then he says, well, then how can you view yourself as complete? Because your death is always in a future existence. How can we become face to face with our death, face to face with our finitude, to be able to understand ourselves as a whole? Being a whole is the core to what he calls authentic existence. And thus, the whole part of Division 2 and also towards the end of Division 1, Heidegger is questioning, well, how can you live authentically? And how does that authentic living tie into our everyday experience of the world? And he uses death. He says, well, by conceptualizing our death as a finite totality of our own existence, we're able to view ourselves authentically. And as a result, this provides further reflection on the nature of death, what it means to die, but also what it means to live in the world. And that provides us with a very interesting frame for which we can carry out our philosophy. Now, finally, for the 5th reason for why you should read it, is that it really has a very big influence on continental philosophy. Even though a lot of continental philosophies post Heidegger don't really engage with Heidegger from the perspective of, well, Heidegger simply was a Nazi and had a Nazi membership, and as a result, people say, well, I don't want to give credit to Heidegger, and that's why you don't read Heidegger a lot or see people attribute a lot to Heidegger. But lots of figures after Heidegger are fundamentally influenced by him. Sartre, Camus, all the existentialists. A lot of people are influenced by Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, the phenomenologists as well. And as a result, it's very difficult to look at the 20th century philosophy without understanding Heidegger, especially on the continental side of things. And thus, reading Heidegger gives you a very good grasp into understanding more about what it means to exist in the world, what it means to wrestle with the questions of truth, knowledge, and experience, and it provides you with a very good foundation for engaging with continental philosophy. Now, I have to say, Being in Time is a bit difficult to get into, especially due to the numerous usage of terminology, which is not necessarily orthodox. So, for example, ontological, or what he calls ontological, is not really the same as what you would use the way you would use ontological in other discussions, in the same way as his uses of existential, existential, existentiale, all these different things. There's a lot of terminology in Heidegger, which makes him very inaccessible at times. But there's, of course, dictionaries online. If you write a Heidegger dictionary or glossary of what does Heidegger's terms mean, that's a very helpful thing as you're engaging with Heidegger's Being in Time. And of course, if you want to get to know an introduction to Heidegger's philosophy, I'll highly recommend you to watch my interview with Dr. Taylor Carman, the professor who wrote the foreword to this, actually what is considered as the main translation, Macquarie Robinson, the main translation to Heidegger's Being in Time. You can go check it out. The interview with Dr. Taylor Carman, I'll put it up in the card above. So make sure you go check that out. It will really help you understand Heidegger before you dive into it. And that that interview also comes with a few secondary literature, which may help you understand Heidegger's works more. Once again, thanks for watching this video. I hope this has given you a brief view for why you should read Heidegger's Being in Time. I know this is a very brief summary of such a complex work, but I hope this has maybe piqued your interest. I'll leave a link to where you might be able to purchase this book in the comments below. Stay safe. See you soon. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. I'll see you next video.